Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Rough Ice Podcast. This is season 1, episode 8, I believe now. I haven't double checked or anything like that. But I have a very special guest with me tonight who hosts the 570 News with Mike Farwell. And he's also the host or he does commentating for the OHL Kitchener Rangers. Mike, welcome to the show, my friend.
Kyle, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
I know for people that are watching this, I'm wearing Mike's favorite team. I call into Mike's show all the time, and this is how I got him. And on his show, he has a funny thing where he's got a dump button because the team, Montreal Canadiens, are not allowed to say on his show. But on my show, we can say that. So
Wow. So this is how it's going to be, huh? This is how we're going to start the Rough Ice Podcast, eh?
It is. And you know what? It's funny. I had Doug last night, and Doug Shedden last night, and he was already making fun of my team because he played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that was his favorite team. So,
well, that's because he's a smart man and a good hockey player. That's why.
He is. So, well, let's get into it. The Toronto Maple Leafs obviously are your favorite team. Why the Toronto Maple Leafs? So what got you into following them and stuff?
You know what's funny about that? Really, it's just geography. And as I got older and I got more into the National Football League, I began to hate the Buffalo Bills because I felt as though the Buffalo Bills were just being shoved down my throat. Every time I turn on the TV, the only game I can get is a Bills game. For whatever reason, that didn't affect me in hockey. All I could get was Leafs games, and that's all I wanted to watch. And I've heard from people in my adult ears, of course, that say the same thing about the Leafs as I just said about Buffalo. They got sick and tired of having the Leafs shoved down their throat here in Southern Ontario. But I was hooked from an early age on Lanny McDonald's mustache and Daryl Sittler's flowing locks. And that's it. I was a Leaf fan.
Lanny still has that beautiful mustache of his.
Oh, he sure does. Beauty duster. Best duster in the game.
I hope he never gets rid of it, to be honest.
I don't think he will.
You do commentating for the Kitchener Rangers, the OHL. How long have you been doing that now?
Oh my gosh. You know, I meant to count. I should have done that before. I don't think this is 25. So don't quote me. It's 24 or 25. I think this is 24, my 24th season.
And what did you know that you're going to get involved in hockey that way of doing commentating, or was it what's the background story of that?
Okay, so I know that you listen to my radio show. So you know that I believe in transparency.
Yep.
So I'll give it to you straight. This is the God's honest truth. If I go back to being a kid and watching those Leafs games, I was very much enamored with not only the game, but the broadcasts. And I would turn down the volume on my TV set and do my own play-by-play into a tape recorder. Way back when I was 6 and 7 years old. When I started collecting hockey cards, unlike some kids, I mean, I put the occasional hockey card in the spokes of my bicycle, but what I would really like doing with my hockey cards is setting up, I had a desk in my bedroom, and I'd set up 2 teams on either side of the imaginary center ice, you know, my 3 forwards, my 2D, my goaltender, and then I'd play a little game with them, and I'd do the running commentary in my head. So when I got into broadcasting, I decided 2 things. These were my goals in broadcasting. Number 1 was to be the next John Derringer on Q107 and play rock music.
Yep.
Or number 2 was to be the next Bob Cole on Hockey Night in Canada and broadcast hockey games. So those are the goals I started out with. And once you get into the business and you learn how things work, you might modify those goals along the way. And I was at my very first job working out in British Columbia. And I was struggling to find a way. I was playing, first of all, easy listening like Celine Dion and Phil Collins music. Not quite what I had in mind. And I was anxious to try to break into sports. So I wrote, this is back in the pre-internet days, you have to understand. I wrote a letter. I couldn't send an email because I didn't have email. Email didn't exist yet. I wrote a letter to Don Cameron, the voice of the Kitchener Rangers, the only voice of the Kitchener Rangers, who I had listened to growing up, asked them for some advice. The man took the time to write me back. Basically, I wrote him a letter asking him how I could someday do his job. And he was so gracious and took the time to write and gave me some pointers, which I tried to follow. And lo and behold, eventually I would work with Don. And when Don stepped away, I would literally follow him in the broadcast booth. But even my path to that comes with, I'm not really proud of this, but you got to do what you got to do. And sometimes what you got to do is embellish on your resume. So believe it or not, there was an advertisement in the newspaper. And again, for you youngins out there, you have to understand that we used to look in the newspaper for jobs. There were these things called classified ads. There were job listings. And there was a job posting for a new daytime talk show on Rogers TV. At the time I was working in radio in Kitchener, I thought this was going to be like my big break. I'm going to go be on Rogers TV and do a talk show. So I had to go to Stone Road Mall in Guelph, and I had to line up and do an open audition at a little setup in the mall at Stone Road Mall in Guelph. I get there, I don't know, 50, 60 people in line. I've got my resume with me. I'm waiting patiently. I get to the front of the line. I'm at the table, and the young lady at the table looks at my resume, looks at me. Oh, you've got some broadcasting experience. Yeah, I've been working in radio for like 4 years or whatever I had done at that time, maybe 5, whatever.
Yep.
And she says, oh, you've done sports. I'm like, oh, yeah, I've done sports. Now, when I say do sports, I put this right at the top of my resume that I had sports broadcasting experience. When I worked out in British Columbia, I was in a little town called Salmon Arm, and nearby was a town called Sicamous. And Sicamous had a hockey team in the Kootenay International Junior Hockey League. In fact, they still do, the Sicamous Eagles. And like 2 or 3 times during the one playoff year, I went to the games. I would do my radio shift, and then I'd go out in the evening and I would quote unquote cover the hockey game, which basically was getting in for free because I had a press pass, and I'd get some audio and I'd take it back and file a story for the newsroom. That was the extent. 2 or 3 times in one playoff season, I quote unquote covered hockey. So here I am at Stone Road Mall, having waited in this line to audition live in front of the camera for a daytime talk show. She sees my resume. Oh, you've done sports. Oh, yeah, I've done sports. We need a sports guy, she says. I'm like, okay. I'm going to tell my sports producer that you've got experience. If he doesn't call you tomorrow, you call him. And she gave me his card. So I said, okay. I never did a screen test. I didn't do anything else that day at Stone Road Mall. I took this guy's card, but I didn't have to call him because the next day he called me. And that very weekend or the next weekend after, within days, I was standing on the sidelines at Seagram Stadium in Waterloo as part of a Rogers TV OUA University football broadcast. And that was literally the very beginning of my sports broadcasting career. So I had never done anything on the air before other than reported on some hockey games. I'd never been on TV before. And because I had put on my resume that I had sports broadcasting experience, which technically I did, I got this opportunity. The producer for Rogers TV on sports back then was a fellow by the name of Chris Schooley. Just a tremendous guy, Kyle. I cannot say enough things about how passionate he was, how professional he was, and how much he helped me. Okay. And he knew, I made it very clear from the very beginning. Because look, when you're starting out, I didn't know jack about jack. Okay, so I'm on TV. I'm like the deer in the headlights. I have no idea what I'm doing. He works with me. I made it clear from the very beginning, hey, I want to do hockey, but hockey on Rogers TV it's like their ultimate sports property. So you don't just waltz into the hockey broadcasts. Right. So I did university sports for a couple of years with them. Football, basketball, volleyball, you name it. Anytime they needed me, they'd call me up. Chris would work with me. He helped me get better. And then finally, the opportunity presented itself that there was an opening on OHL Primetime, they called it back then, with the crew in Guelph. So after a couple of years of university sports, I went over, joined the crew in Guelph, and the rest, as they say, is history. I did not start out on play-by-play, but I got onto a hockey broadcast. I was the host. Then I became color commentator. Then finally I got my chance at play-by-play. They moved me from Guelph to Kitchener in 2004, and I have not looked back since, eventually moving into doing it full-time on the radio after Don Cameron stepped away. So thanks to a little embellishment on my resume, and a newspaper classified job listing for a TV talk show, I somehow ended up doing play-by-play for the Kitchener Rangers.
That, you know what? It's funny that you say that because you embellished into your career, and hockey. Hockey players or coaches do anything they can just to try to get to the NHL, whether you're fighting or whatever, right? And Mike, you were just that type of guy where you're just like, you know what? I did the play-by-play and I made it, right? So
That's right. Put me in, coach. I'll do whatever you need me to do.
so you've seen a lot of hockey. I'm
Yes.
sure the 25 plus years that you've been doing it, the sport has changed quite a bit. Let's go back. So when you first started, was there two-line passing, or was that just starting to end?
Yeah, that was already out. If I
already out.
remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that was already out. Yeah.
It was already out. Okay, but there's still a lot more roughness and toughness then than it is now, right? So what are some of the? So let's go back to that. Like some of your first times being a hockey broadcaster, you're earlier in your career. What's that like as a commentator that does the sport? Like, when we hear it or see it on TV, like to get the names down correctly or the numbers and all that stuff. What is that like as a kind of give us a first class look at that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's something that is underappreciated by those of us who just consume it, right? Like I said, when I was a kid, I was fascinated by the broadcast. I loved the sound of the voices and the kind of patter, the pitter patter that they had, right? The rhythm to their voice.
Yep.
The preparation, I think, largely goes unrecognized in all of this. And a lot of the pros these days, you'll see them posting pictures now of what their booth looks like with how they do their lists, the number of notes they have in front of them, etc. I'm not fancy at all in that way, but the main point here is a minimum of 2 hours. For me, it's usually 3 before every game. I'm in the arena. First thing I'm doing is visiting both sides of the arena, home and visitor, to talk to the coaches, to talk to the trainers, to maybe talk to a couple of the players, just to get a sense of things, right? And then that's helping me with my background information for the game. And I'll get to the media room, I'll get my free cup of coffee and usually a sandwich or something, and I'll sit down and I'll start making my notes. And again, I'm pretty simple about this, especially since I moved into play-by-play. The number one goal that I have every night is to get the names right. Their parents are probably watching or listening, right? You don't want to be mispronouncing names. So I do my very best in those, couple hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours to memorize the roster. Fortunately, in the Ontario Hockey League, there are only 20 teams and you see the same teams over and over and over again. So it comes to me pretty easily, but that's my first concern is to know all the players' names, to make sure I can match the jersey number to the player so I don't make mistakes when I'm on the air. And then I try to have 2 to 3 little tidbits per team that I might be able to work in. And I only do that many because I want to be aware of the person that I'm working with. They want to bring something to the broadcast and I want to make sure they have room to do that. So I'll just a couple to a few points per team. It might be some interesting stat on the power play. It might be an interesting story about a player that I've learned, whatever, just so I have that ready when I go to the booth. And then we do a 30-minute pregame show before every one of our broadcasts. And from there, like once I get into the booth, it's simply that. It's go time. Put on the headset. I have communication with my producer back at the radio station, right? Because wherever we are, we're away from the radio station. We're either in the Memorial Auditorium in Kitchener or at one of the other 19 rinks around the league. So I communicate either via text before I'm on the headset or over the headset. We can talk back and forth and get ready for the broadcast. And then once 30 minutes before puck drop arrives, we're ready to go on the air.
And it's cool because doing this podcast, I got players and coaches to get your perspective as a commentator. I kind of like that because you're kind of the overhead, person that could see everything, right? You got the fans and the coaches are there, but you could see the whole rink. So when you see something like that, do you kind of go into coaching mode as well, like as a fan? Like how do you distinguish trying to not be such a fan to a professionalism? Because like let's put it this way, even when I'm doing the timekeeping for the Listwell Cyclones, of course I'm going to be biased and I want Cyclones to win, right? But I'm not going to go and jinx the game and start making up stuff, right? But how do you distinguish on your side of keeping a professional and trying not to keep that biasness on one side or the other?
First and foremost, I am a fan of the game.
Yep.
I really am. I love the game of hockey, and I particularly love Major Junior. I will say here, which I've said many times before, and I know I'll say many times after this, I do believe it is not just the best development league in the world, the Ontario Hockey League, but it is hockey played at the best level, right?
Yep.
They're not yet tainted by all the money, the contracts, all of these different things. So it's less of a business. It's a business,
Yep.
but it's less of a business. So I really love the game at this level. And I get enthusiastic about it. But I would be lying, just like you said when you're timekeeping in Listowel.
Yeah.
If you are timekeeping in Listowel, which is your hometown, so you see the Sykes night in and night out, doesn't
Yep.
matter who comes in, when the Sugar Kings come in, when the Hawks come in, whatever, you're always there for the Sykes game. I don't care what anybody tells you. I don't care what anybody tells you about how much bias they try to leave outside before they go on the air. If I see the Kitchener Rangers 68 times a year,
Yeah.
I grew up in the city of Kitchener watching the Kitchener Rangers. Of course, I'm biased towards the Rangers.
Yeah.
I think, and you'll probably get a different answer from everybody you ask, but I think I give the other team their due, but they don't get quite as much enthusiasm as the Kitchener Rangers get because I am the home broadcaster for the Kitchener Rangers. And I do think I get a little bit more leeway because I do radio play by play as well. When I'm on the road and fans in Kitchener are checking in on the broadcast, they want to hear how well their team is doing, right?
Yeah.
The Kitchener Rangers. That's who I'm broadcasting for. So
Right.
I think I get a little bit more leeway that way than the TV guys might. But anyway, of course I'm biased. I try to keep it as even as I can, but I will not deny the bias.
And you know what? I mean, I'll say this right now. I think Kitchener Ott's one of the most beautiful arenas, I think, in the league for sure.
Oh, I don't
In
think
my
there's any
opinion,
question about that. There's no
right?
question about it, in fact. Yeah.
Like, and it's a historical rink, right? Like, how long has it been around now, right? Like, isn't it
Built in
one?
51.
It's like one of the, I think, is it not the oldest or one of the oldest rinks in the OHL?
Yep. And Sudbury has already made plans now. They've approved a new arena there. Both Sudbury Arena and the Memorial Auditorium in Kitchener were built the same year. So when Sudbury, I think it's slated to open in 27, maybe 28. Anyway, when they open it, the Memorial Auditorium in Kitchener will be the oldest rink in the Ontario Hockey League.
So if you guys are listening, Google it, check it out. It is honestly something that you have to just even Google images. It doesn't do justice of being there, but you have to just check out the pictures of the yacht, right? So
It is a cathedral.
Oh, it is. So going back 25 years, the sport's changed quite a bit. Like we know back, 20, even 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was a much physical, more game. The equipment was a little bit smaller. Even the 60s, 70s, 50s, there's no such thing as a helmet really. Things like that. But as a commentator for you, growing up watching the OHL and the Kitchener Rangers, sorry, what have you seen change overall besides the fighting and the enforcement? Like, what has really stuck out in your eyes?
The players are far more creative, dare I say, far more skilled than they've ever been before. We talk about hockey now being a 12-month, a year-round sort of thing, right? Where there used to be an off season and you'd show up at training camp to get back in shape. Well, these players report in shape. They stay in shape. They're working out multiple times a day in the preseason, in the off season. Like they are fine-tuned machines and they're doing things and thinking about things creatively. I might call it the video game influence, but they're thinking of things creatively that just weren't even conceived of decades ago. So for me, that's absolutely the biggest difference. They're far more creative. They are more skilled. And I say that as admitting and will always say, I think Wayne Gretzky was the greatest player to ever play the game. But I'm not sure Wayne Gretzky, for example, had the Michigan in his arsenal.
Right.
And that's something that's the low end of the talent scale these days with the plays we see players making. So there's no question there's a higher level of creativity, a higher level of skill, and conditioning. Like these players are bigger, stronger, faster. period. Like, have you watched Connor McDavid
I know.
accelerate? It is ridiculous. And I got to watch him for 3 years with the Erie Otters when it was the same way. So those are the big changes that I see.
Do you going when you see a kid that graduates from OHL to NHL, do you see his playing style kind of change, or do you, or even as a coach, like because you've seen Pete DeBoer even as a head coach the Kitchener Rangers. What do you see as a development side of the OHL or even just the Rangers itself, and do you see them change as they get higher? Do you kind of see them kind of keep that mentality, skill set? Like, do you see them stay the same or kind of change as they evolve?
It's funny that you asked that about coaching as well, Kyle, because I'm watching the NHL playoffs this year, and there's Pete DeBoer and Steve Spott with the Dallas Stars, and they make it to the Final Four, and I'm following them, and deep down, I'm not shy about saying I was cheering for them.
Yep.
I'm not a Dallas fan per se. We already talked about me being a Leafs fan, but I'm cheering for these guys that I knew when they were in Kitchener, and I joked with a few people that I wish Pete DeBoer had given me answers like he gave these reporters in his media conferences. He's so much more relaxed now, and he gives these long, thoughtful answers. He's a pretty colorful character. Man, there were times where I was afraid to ask Pete DeBoer questions because he was pretty surly after a loss. On the player side, I think I would say that every player changes from this league to the National League, and they change insofar as they adapt to whatever their pro team wants them to do or wants them to be. If they are a guy that's lighting it up in the O and scoring 50, 60 goals, obviously they're going to be goal scorers in the National League. But their game still has to evolve and adapt to that pro system, that pro style, and playing against all of those bigger, stronger, faster players. One of my favorite kind of games to play, having been in the league for as long as I have, is projecting who's going to make it to the next level, and then what kind of player will they be at the next level. Like, you can see some guys that are pretty tidy in major junior. They might score 25 to 35 goals in junior, but you look at them and say, you know what? They've got the body type, they've got the skill set. If you can score 25 to 35 in junior, it does not necessarily mean you're going to be scoring that many in the show. So I wonder, might they be that third line grinder? Might they be a penalty killing specialist because of the way that they skate? Those are the sorts of games that I play now, just to see if I can correctly predict or project how a player turns out when they make it to the pros.
A guy like Brad Marchand, he played for London Knights, I believe, right? And was that who he played for? London Knights?
No, Marchand. No? I think he came out of the Quebec League.
Oh, was it the Quebec League? Okay, but you've seen like a couple of players that
sure. Oh yeah.
Do you see guys that really shock you? You're like, okay, this guy, he made the NHL, but then next thing you know, he's like captain or things like that really shocked you, or do you or is it kind of more like you see these guys that play 3 or 4 seasons in the major juniors, and then you see them kind of evolve, and you're like, okay, you know what, this is kind of predictable. Like, is there anything that really stands out to you?
I don't know about shocks. Like, I think about a guy like Gabriel Landeskog, who, again, I'm showing my bias, Kitchener Ranger, but was drafted to the NHL at 18, so he played just 2 years of junior. But you knew from the minute he arrived in Kitchener as a 16-year-old, this was going to be a future player. Right. Now, did I think he'd go to the National Hockey League and become the youngest captain in history? No, I did not see that coming by any stretch. But I don't know that I get shocked anymore. Right. One of my other favorite stories of a former Kitchener Ranger, this guy, he lit it up. Justin Azevedo, I'm thinking, what's the name of the hometown? Just outside of London. Sugar. It'll come to me later. Anyway, just tore it up in junior. It was just incredible. But size-wise, you're like, I don't think this guy is going to make it to the National Hockey League. And certainly he did not. But if I'm not mistaken, and I could have checked before I sat down with you, but he might still be playing in Europe. I know he played last season, and the guy's pushing 40 now, but he had all the skill in the world, and Europe gives you a slightly easier schedule than the National Hockey League. It's based more on skill than it is on physicality. And this guy was a tremendous junior. Lucan, he's from Lucan, Ontario, Justin Azevedo. And he's still like he's won KHL championships. I think it's an incredible story. I love watching him.
Okay, so let's get to the rough stuff now. So you've seen some pretty, I'm sure, pretty crazy things that have happened in the rink over your career, fighting, brawls, coaches yelling at each other or something like that, right? And it's funny because I grew up. I told a few of the other players that I've interviewed, but I grew up watching Central Hockey League, which doesn't exist anymore, but it became now the East Coast League. Tulsa Oilers was my team. And that was, 5-on-5, brawls and yelling and pile ups and all that stuff. So, Mike, what have you seen? Like, was there anything crazy? Like, I'm sure you've got lots of stories, and unfortunately, we're only a 45-minute show, and we could do so many chapters and stuff, right? But what stands out to you? I know that like over this season, we had the London Knights. Of course, is a huge rivalry against Kitchener, suspensions, things like that, right? But back then, it was more of a normal thing. So go ahead, give me a couple of stories here.
I was going to mention the 2023-24 London Knights because the team that I just watched this year win the Ontario Hockey League was every bit that throwback team. They had a player on their team that got suspended 7 times this season. So you can just tell the kind of player that he was. 20 years ago, he would never have been suspended, but we look at the game through different eyes these days, don't we? I would never go so far, Kyle, as to say I've seen it all.
Right.
But I've seen a heck of a lot. Going back to the time that I was watching this league as a fan. So remember that. I'm born in 1971. So in the late 70s, early 80s, it's my prime time for watching these games. And I can tell you this. There were games that I would go to with my dad, and I'll never forget the game. I wish I could remember who the Rangers were playing, but we left with like 7 minutes to go in the third period because there were too many fights. My dad's like, this is not hockey. We didn't come here to watch this. I'm like, Dad, I want to watch this. But no, we left that game early. I remember Mike Moore, a former Kitchener Ranger, who Supermaned into the opposing team's bench. Like, you want to talk about what's going on the ice, and then boom, he flies full-on Superman into the opposing team's bench. He was as tough as they come, Kyle, taking on all comers. I remember a former Kitchener Ranger who got traded to North Bay, and then the Rangers and the North Bay Centennials at the time played a playoff series against each other, and the Rangers goaltender was lights out, so it's a blowout late in the game. And the former Kitchener Ranger was sent by his coach to run the Rangers goaltender. Well, all heck broke out then, too, as you can imagine, in a playoff game. I remember times that police had to be there in between the penalty boxes. It goes on and on. I've seen a lot of that stuff. In my time in the league, you mentioned coaches and yelling at one another.
Yep.
There is, I will not speak of the teams involved or the participants, but I know for certain that once the coaches even like walked down the tunnel and were underneath the stands, what was boiling over on the ice continued into the hallway and was very physical. That's the coaches. I remember a playoff series that the Kitchener Rangers were involved in. I don't know. It wasn't the championship year in 2008. Either way. And the Rangers had Adam Keefe, actually. So Sheldon's younger brother.
Yep.
Or Adam older. Doesn't matter. Sheldon's brother. He's coaching over, I think he's still with the Belfast Giants now. Anyway, he's coaching over in the UK. And this guy was, nails. Tough as they come. And he was always the last one to leave the ice, no matter what. So after the pregame skate or the warm-up skate, he would be the last one to leave the ice. Not just for his team, the last one to leave the ice. Well, you can imagine in a playoff series, there's going to be some gamesmanship, right? So we're not going to let Kiefer be the last one to leave the ice. So I think it was Sarnia was the team they were playing. Doesn't matter. But then, the Sarnia Sting player is not going to leave the ice. And all of a sudden you have to have officials out there to get these guys off the ice. And then wouldn't you know, the next game comes out and Keefe makes sure that their net's facing the wrong way when they come out for warm up. These little things that happen. I don't think I've ever seen a full on line brawl, if you can believe it, in my time covering the game. Like a full on, sometimes you get the hugging, like maybe a couple of guys are going on the same stoppage, but Other guys are just kind of hugging it out. I really think in my almost quarter century, the best of that stuff, unfortunately, passed me by. But I remember it as a fan, Kyle, and boy, oh boy, was that fun to watch.
It's funny, like it was more of an entertainment thing. I mean, I remember going into the rink and my dad would be like, "All right, what do you want? Dippin' Dots." That was the only thing I cared about. Dippin' Dots and seeing a hockey fight, right? And then if it was intermission, there was no, like we said, there was newspapers. There was no such thing as social media. There was no, like, internet was just coming, but it was like barely a thing, right? So what do you do during intermission? You get mini sticks, you get some chuck-up pucks, and you go out and you play in them. You play during the intermission and stuff, right? Has there been a player in your eye that was a fighter or an enforcer? It doesn't have to be a fighter per se, but an enforcer or just someone that really stuck out to you, and you're like, okay, this guy is really, he's a serious guy that you don't want to get into a fight with.
Steve Downey
Okay.
was one of those. I just mentioned Adam Keefe.
Yep.
But hands down, and he's one of my favorite stories, Kyle, to ever come out of this league.
Yep.
And you're wearing the hat of his NHL team, Arbor Jackeye.
Yep.
I remember going to training camp the year that Arbor was a free agent invite.
Okay.
And so we're watching an exhibition game. And I'm there with my family. I don't cover exhibition games. I go to camp just to watch some players and get some notes for the season. But I was there as a fan with my family. And I see this guy, this defenseman for Kitchener out there on the ice, and he did not skate well. I'm like, who the hell is number whatever? So I find my list, and I wouldn't even be able to pronounce the name, right? Nobody, X. The last name starts with X, but it's pronounced Jackeye.
Yep.
And he just looked completely out of place. I said, oh, free agent walk-on from St. Catharines. Have fun on the trip back home to Niagara region, pal. But he made the team. And he played sparingly in his first year. Sometimes he's up on press row with me. But this kid, Kyle, never stopped working. Never stopped working. And not only did he turn himself into a more than capable defenseman in junior, that's why he free agent to the National Hockey League and signed a deal without ever getting drafted, because he was good enough. He really was good enough. But the reason he was is because he worked his ass off. That's all he did. And along the way, he also became the most feared presence in the game. He was afraid of nobody. And there was the famous fight, and you can still look it up. The captain of the Owen Sound attack, I think Woolley was the captain. Forgive me if he wasn't, but Mark Woolley was the tough guy for the Owen Sound attack. And believe me, tough enough customer.
Yep.
And Arbor Jackeye was the reigning heavyweight. Like nobody, I shouldn't say nobody would go near him, but he was understood to be the guy. And Woolley wanted a piece, and Arbor obliged him, and they skated to center ice. And this is like 5 years ago. Like this stuff you don't see, right? They're out at center ice. They're doing the whole thing with the sleeves, right? The gloves are down, and off they go. And I think it was two-punched him, but Arbor caught him very early in the fight, and out cold was Mark Woolley and down on the ice. And then Arbor skates off, and he does this, and then like this, and oh no, he did this. He did the little I'm sleeping, and got a suspension. So
And, I just saw him play back in February when we were in Montreal, and I could tell you he was like he was my favorite guy, because I've seen, not just his fighting, but like he's just a tough customer. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and the thing is, a guy that plays like he plays and came into the NHL with the reputation he came in with, he's basically going to have to do that. And unfortunately, it takes a huge toll on the body. I wish he didn't have to, because you're right. He's a good, strong, tough defenseman. He can play. He can play at the National Hockey League level. I would love to see him get the chance, because he's going to keep working his ass off, and he's going to be something pretty special. I don't know now, coming back from his injuries, what life is going to be like for him.
He reminds me of Chris Nyland. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you remember Chris Nyland? He was a good
Knuckles. Yeah.
Knuckles, right? But he was the same thing. He was a tough customer, but he also could play the sport, right? Like, he scored goals and won the cup and all that stuff, right? So, the sport has changed, when you first started to now. What do you see? Like, do you like it how it is now? Do you kind of wish that we're not getting away from the enforcer? I'm like, I get it. Like, the injuries, nobody wants to see a guy lose his career for the rest of his life over a stupid hit or whatever. I get the safety aspect of it. I'm never going to go against safety, number one. But what do you think of, because this was a sport, like, if you watch the history of hockey, even I think a documentary I watched, this was like 1900s or whatever, and the guys were dropping gloves, right? It was fighting all the time, Rocket Richard, those guys. Now, it's not really the fighting you see, but you see more, I wouldn't say dirty hits, but more open hits. And I would say teams, and they do, like Kitchener Rangers, we saw it with the London Knights, they all stuck up as a team. But you don't really see that anymore. What's your take on that? What do you think? Do you like it? Do you not like it? What do you think there, Mike?
I've come pretty much full circle
Okay.
on this. So I grew up as a fan of Rock'em Sock'em, Don Cherry, tough hockey.
Yep.
When I started watching the game, like players still weren't all wearing helmets. Remember that, right? Anyway, fighting was absolutely a part of it. I told you that story about my dad, leaving a game because he said, this isn't hockey. That's not what I brought you here for. And I was loving it. So as a younger man, absolutely fully on board. And then we started learning more about injuries, concussions, all of these different things. And I'm like, you know what? It's really kind of dumb. You don't do this in any other sport and blah, blah, blah. But I've come all the way back around, Kyle. And I'm glad I'm okay with the dedicated or the designated goon, the designated enforcer not being a part of the game. I'm okay with that. But I think the game actually lacks some physicality right now. And I don't like that. As much as I love the skill, and I talked earlier, that's the biggest difference in the game. And I want to watch these players perform at their highest level and do all kinds of crazy things that I never would have thought of. And they're, doing it on skates. I love all of it. But I don't think you should be able to skate around out there with impunity. I think you should have to keep your head up when you're cutting east-west across the ice. I think you should have to wonder what's coming when you skate into that corner to go after a puck. I think you should have to battle. I think battle drills that you do in practice should carry over 100 times harder in the course of a game. And yeah, you know what? If a young man 17, 18, 19 years old wants to drop the gloves with another young man, then damn it, do it.
Right.
Drop your gloves. Don't face wash me. Don't wave your stick in my direction. Put down your gloves and throw a few punches. Let's go.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I know some people will call me a Neanderthal for that. Fine. I've watched this game long enough to have gone through the whole cycle, and this is where I'm back to now. I think we need a little bit of that presence out there like the policeman.
Do you think that a lot of injuries are going to come, and not from the fighting aspect, because now they're kind of getting away from that, but do you think it's going to come more as stupid hits are going to come and nail somebody, and now they're going to take him out for, look at Sidney Crosby, how many concussions he had. Connor Bedard had a concussion already this year. So do you think that we're kind of going into, I wouldn't say a different era, because we went from the enforcer era to now the open hit, you're kind of keeping your head down. What do you think?
I think you could make the argument for it, right? Yep. And I don't have stats to back it up. And I understand that the minute we make that argument, there will be other people that, defend their side of it. But I think there is something to that, because how many concussions did Wayne Gretzky have?
Right.
Oh, and is that because Dave Semenko and Marty McSorley were always by his side? Of course it was. So again, and I'm also fully aware of the Steve Chasons of the world and, so many others that we could look at, Wade Belak, that suffered from, concussions and post-concussion syndrome and all of these different things. But we have to remember that we're not there anymore, and we don't want to be there anymore. These guys were fighting every other night, and they were going after heavyweights, and their job was to be out there. Look at Rempe now in the National League with the New York Rangers, right? That guy seems to be pretty one-dimensional, and that's the kind of guy I might worry about a little bit. But generally, we're away from guys like that. Each team, or at least half the teams, would have their designated enforcers who, in the course of a career, I don't know, would fight 100, 200 times? That's gone. And that's good. It's good that it's gone. But if a guy through the course of his career fights 40 times, and that would be a lot, okay, so you have a 12-year career and you fight 3 to 5 times a year. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over it. And easy for me to say, I guess. I'm not the one being punched in the face, but I think that the most of the injuries that we're concerned about came from the guys that were out there fighting every other night, sometimes twice a night, the toughest guys on the other team.
And it's funny because I watched a documentary and Trailer Park Boys did it, from what I understand, but it's called Tough Guys. And it gives you, and it's an older documentary, it's from the 90s, but you kind of get a perspective of the enforcers that played in the Central Hockey League. And one of the players that stood out to me, I forget what his name was, but he said, I'm 30 now. You know, when you're 20, 19, 18 years old, that's when you're, you know, you think you could fight every day, you're excited, whatever, you could do what you got to do. He says, I'm 30. And this was at the time of the documentary. He goes and says, you know, you get tired of it, right? It's kind of at a point where you're on the ice and you're like, I don't want to fight, but I have to fight, but you don't want to, but it's your job because you're still trying to make that career at the time, right? So I get that. Like, you know, it's kind of, I would say right now is kind of an interesting period because so many, like the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League has eliminated fighting completely now, right? So what's going to happen? Are the leagues going to follow? So it'd be very interesting. I'm surprised that Quebec did it because they got that tough league, the LNH or LN something, one of the toughest leagues in the world, right? So the fact that Quebec did that kind of shocked me, but no, it's very interesting. So as a commentator, kids that are listening to this that love hockey, you know, doesn't matter if they want to be a coach or they want to do what your job is, maybe, you know, the Kitchener Rangers 40 or 50 years from now, or they want to be a player. What would you say to them, Mike?
Lie on your resume.
Well, I mean, hey, if you got to do that, right? No. Like, do you have any, like, would you have any tips or anything for anybody listening that loves hockey? Like, this is just, you know, it's just like two Canadian guys are talking about hockey. What would you say to them, Mike?
I would honestly just say that if it is something that excites you, if it is something that you dream about and think would be a great job, then do it. And do it however and wherever you can. For me, and as I said back at the beginning of this, I came into a broadcasting career with the idea that I wanted to be the next Bob Cole on Hockey Night in Canada, right? And of course, that's what you're going to be aspiring to, the pros. But when you step back a minute and you think about it, you realize there are only 32 of those jobs in the entire world.
Yeah.
Now, we could also argue, well, there are only 20 such jobs in the Ontario Hockey League. True, too. That's true. But again, if you want to be the next Bob Cole or the next Gord Miller or whomever it's going to be, the next Chris Cuthbert,
Yep.
there are only 32 NHL teams, the next Joe Bowen. But beyond the NHL, there's the American Hockey League. There's the Ontario Hockey League. There's the Western Hockey League. There's the Quebec and Maritimes Junior Hockey League. Then you can go to, there's the Midwestern Junior B League, the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League.
Yep.
You've got the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, the British Columbia Junior. You know where I'm going with it. There
Yep.
are so many leagues. And I'll tell you what, when I started out, I still had my eyes on that big prize, and I kicked tires along the way. I had a couple of opportunities, and the last time I had the opportunity and I didn't pursue it to the end, I realized I'd reached a point in my life where I'm like, you know what? I'm in my hometown. I go to a rink that's got 7,000 fans in it every Friday night. There's so much passion. It's like my own National Hockey League. Like I love it. I get to go to a rink and broadcast a game. It doesn't matter to me anymore if it's the Ontario League or the National League. And I hope that anybody who's aspiring to do this can come to that realization. I mean, I hope they make it to the National Hockey League like I never did. I hope they can achieve that dream for themselves. But if they can't, there are lots, and I do mean lots, of other places for you to ply your craft. Could be the university leagues, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you get the chance to do it, if you get to be the one who says he shoots, he scores, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Do you have a favorite memory before I let you go about your whole career? What stands out the most to you?
Oh my goodness. My favorite memory.
I love this question because everybody just sits there and they're like, which one is it?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many.
I know.
I remember the first game I did on the radio, and like I was doing games on TV at the time, but radio for me has always held a special place. So I remember very well the game in Plymouth. It was on New Year's Eve, 2006. So just before January 1, 2007. I have the game sheet. I have the puck from Plymouth. It was a road game signed by the guy, Spencer Anderson, who scored the game-winning goal. That stands out to me a lot. I'll never forget the first game I got to do with Don Cameron, who I idolized growing up. And I remember I could still feel it in my bones. We were in Windsor and the national anthem came on, and I thought, oh bleep, like I'm about to broadcast a game with this legend. Like I better not screw this up. So I have very fond memories of that. Not too long ago, when the Kitchener Rangers and Sioux Greyhounds played a Western Conference final, Game 7, double overtime. Rangers lost the game, but what a series. That one stands out too. I've had some fun over the years.
And you know what? Those are the best things, because you could just look back at that and you could always say, I did this or I did that or I saw this. And those are the stories that you'll have for the rest of your life. But,
absolutely.
Mike, you know what? Everybody that's listening or seeing this, please, please, please. I remember as a kid, and even, I still do it. Tune into AM. Listen to the Kitchener Rangers. You'll hear Mike on it, or even during the day. Mike Farwell show on 570. It's a fantastic show. Mike, thank you very, very much for your time. I love listening to you every day. And, when I'm if I'm listening, or if I'm at a Lisbon Cyclones game and I catch the end of the game and I'm out there and I want to listen to the Kitchener Rangers, I always tune into you on the car. So thank you very much, my friend.
Listen, you made me work some overtime today. I've already done my talk show. I'm talking more, but no, this has been great. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And everybody, just remember, Montreal Canadiens over the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's all I got to say. There's no dump button.
Down.
There's no dump button on my end, but I just had to
settle down.
Thanks, everybody. All right, Mike.